Granbury's legacy as a commander is a pretty interesting one. He's pretty uncontroversial. I haven't been able to find much in the way of critique about him, and he just did his job. His men always performed, and that's really just his legacy. Which is pretty amazing considering he has no military background, no military training prior to joining the Confederate Army. He just possessed those innate leadership abilities that people wanted to follow him. He was strong, he was smart, and he was able to get it done. Now, he was not a Texan by birth. He was born in Copiah County, Mississippi, and raised just north of there in Hinds County. He was born to Nancy and Norval Granbury. Norval was a Baptist preacher and a farmer. He attended Oakland College near where he grew up, which is now known today as Alcorn State University. After finishing his schooling at the ripe age of 19, he decided he was going to move out to Texas. He eventually settled in Waco, where he established a very successful law practice and was eventually elected the Chief Justice of the county. Now, while in Waco, he would meet and marry his wife, Fanny Sims. So as I move on and talk about Granbury's service during the war, you'll see that Fanny was with him every step of the way, and she unfortunately will share a similar tragic end. So Fanny and Hiram were married in 1858, and when Texas seceded, Hiram would raise a company of infantry in Waco called the Waco Guards. He would quickly be promoted to major and would lead the 7th Texas Infantry. He and his men would see action early on in the war at the Battle of Fort Donelson, and while he was there, Fanny moved up and stayed nearby in Kentucky. Well, once Fort Donelson fell, Granbury was captured along with his men, and he was sent to a military prison in Boston. Now, around that time, Fanny started to feel very ill, and Granbury actually got a special parole to get Fanny situated up north near where the prison camp was. One of Granbury's close friends in the prison was a physician, and he actually extended an invitation for Fanny to come live at his house in Hagerstown, Maryland with his wife. There she would seek treatment from a doctor, and they realized that she was indeed very, very sick. After about 6 months as a POW, Granbury was officially exchanged during a prisoner swap, and he would return to duties with the Confederate Army. But his old regiment, the 7th Texas, had not been reformed yet. Most of them were still imprisoned. So he took up some desk work, did recruiting duty in Texas for a bit, ended up spending some time in northern Mississippi. All the while, Fanny is still getting treatment up north in Hagerstown, Maryland. Pretty soon, it became evident that she was dying of ovarian cancer, and she was not going to live much longer. So Granbury got permission to head north and go get her. He brought her back to her father's house in Alabama, and she would die March 20th, 1863. So now, just 2 weeks shy of their 5-year wedding anniversary, Hiram Granbury is a widower. Fanny's headstone, which stands right next to her husband's, does not mark the location of her grave. She was buried in an unmarked grave at Magnolia Cemetery in Mobile, Alabama. Unfortunately for Hiram, there's no time to grieve. The war goes on. At the same time his wife dies, the 7th Texas gets reorganized, and he's assigned to be the colonel of the regiment. Less than 2 months after his wife's death, he would be leading his men in combat at the Battle of Raymond, which is only a few miles away from where he was raised. Later that same month, he would be leading his men in the Battle of Jackson. After the fall of Vicksburg, he would finally be assigned to the Army of Tennessee. He was wounded at the Battle of Chickamauga, and after his brigade commander got wounded at the Battle of Missionary Ridge, Granbury would assume brigade command for the very first time. Now, Granbury's brigade was part of Cleburne's famous division. Now, all the battles and all the stories that secured Cleburne's legacy as one of the most effective combat leaders in the Confederacy, Granbury's Texas Brigade was right there, a part of it, doing the work. And after Granbury's death, at the Battle of Nashville, there's a spot on the battlefield still called Granbury's Lunette, even though he was never there, because those Texans held the far right of the Confederate line, and they were the only ones not to falter. From the beginning, this brigade saw so much hard fighting and so much hard campaigning, but I think what they were asked to do at Franklin was truly their greatest test of the war. As General Hood began to lay out his plan and form the army up at Winstead Hill, he would place General Patrick Cleburne's division directly on the right side of Columbia Pike during the approach into town. General Granbury's brigade was part of Cleburne's division, and he would make up the brigade that was closest to the road. So on this side of the line, Lane's Federal Brigade was formed up on the advance line, and on this side of the road, Conrad's Federal Brigade was formed up on the advance line. So Brown's division will be attacking Lane's brigade on this side of the road, and directly across the street, Cleburne's division will be attacking Conrad's brigade on this side of the road. Both Federal brigades crumbled here as the Confederates attacked. The action just across the street from each other actually unfolded pretty differently. Because of the way that Wagner's line was set up, Conrad's brigade ran a little bit more perpendicular to this road right here. It didn't cut back towards the main works. So as Conrad's men began to peel out and retreat across these fields, Lane's brigade don't even really get engaged. He said he only had one regiment that actually fired on the Confederates. The rest of them went ahead and ran without even a fight. So for a better visual, we're here looking south towards the attacking Confederates. This is what the Federal troops on the advance line would have seen. Conrad's men were extended in a line perpendicular to this road to the left, facing to the south. And Lane's brigade, also facing that direction towards the Confederates, is in a line here going that way. But instead of being perpendicular to the road, it actually cut back that direction. So that's why Conrad's men were getting first contact on this side of the road, and these guys only had one regiment here to fire. The rest of them were back there, and they were already leaving because they were watching Conrad here fight and follow at. And now Granbury, along with the rest of Claiborne's division, is pushing on that side of the road, and they just bulldoze Conrad's line. One officer that was on the far left of Conrad's brigade said that he was watching all the regiments peel back one by one and retreat back to the Federal works, and he said it looked like a train of powder burning. So now, up to this point in the battle, Granbury's brigade has stepped off from Winstead Hill. They've moved 1.5 miles in the attack to face Conrad's men on the advance line. They've taken long-range artillery fire from the Kentucky battery along the main line. They've taken several big volleys from Conrad's men before they retreated, and now they've got a 1/2 mile sprint till they make it to the main works. These guys were gassed, but they were not slowing down. Once they had that advance line routed, they chased in right behind them. All right, so we are departing the location of the advance line, the Federal forward line, and now we've got Granbury's brigade to the right that is now rushing forward, and Brown's division to the left and Claiborne to the right. And everything you see in front of me, I'm driving the path of what was a 1/2 mile foot race where thousands of men were rushing through what is now a residential neighborhood, trying to get back to the relative safety of the Federal main line of defense. And we're approaching it now just past this red light. You'll see it's going to open up into what is we now call Carter Hill Battlefield Park. And so we've got really the last 50 to 60 feet before the main Federal line preserved in that field, and about another 30, 40 feet right here. So this field on the right, this is where Granbury would have had his brigade just rushing up in this area, and the main works are right where those signs are. I can actually see the Texas Monument from here. All right, so now that we're here at the main works at the Carter Hill Battlefield Park, I'll orient you again. This is Columbia Pike, and it is going right straight towards the Carter House, which is right there, right? I've got this wide angle lens, so it looks super far away, but it's really only about 100 yards that direction, and the main line right there. So we're about 250 to 300 feet away from the main Federal entrenchments. This piece of ground directly in front of me, this is the last hurdle. This is the last stretch before Granbury and his men reached the Federal works. So to the left is the Carter House, which they would have clearly seen directly in front of me right here. That is the location of where the cotton gin would have been standing, a very prominent figure on this battlefield. And we have found the exact location of that Carter gin since this property has been reclaimed. And those guests right over there are walking right past the foundation of that original cotton gin, which you can see today. But this was the ultimate objective of Granbury. He stepped off at Winstead Hill 2 miles that direction, and they finally made it to right here under a tremendous amount of fire. But before we talk about the action in the sector for Granbury, I want you to see the Federal point of view from the trenches looking this way. So put yourselves in the shoes of a Federal rifleman along this main line. As you look south, it's impossible to tell today what they would have seen. What they would have seen was a vast open field, and they would have had pure visibility on all of Conrad's men on the advance line a 1/2 mile south of here, and Lane's men across the street. They would have seen it. So the action that was unfolding in front of them as Granbury was attacking, and really the weight of the entire Confederate army was attacking that advance line, all of that was plainly visible to the men behind the entrenchments right here. So all along to my left and right would have been Federal soldiers here, rifles between the headlogs, hammers cocked, ready to fire, waiting for the opportunity. But all they saw were their own soldiers retreating right at them. So they held their fire. They can't shoot. They're watching this just incredibly desperate situation unfold right in their front, and they're helpless. They can't do anything but just watch it. The first men of the advance line start making their way to the trenches. They're jumping over their works. They're laying down in the ditch. They're exhausted. They're tired. And the guys here are just holding, waiting. And they let as many of Wagner's men come through as they can, but the stragglers who have fallen behind are intermixed with the Confederates. And they reached a certain point where the Federal troops along this line simply could not hold their fire any longer. And with Granbury and his brigade 100 yards that direction, this line opened up. Confederate soldiers, Federal stragglers, and anyone out in this field died side by side. This is the 1st Kentucky battery right here along the edge of the road, facing straight at Granbury's men and Gordon's men across the street. This battery had been shelling Granbury before they even reached the Federal line. And when the order came to fire, this battery opened up directly in the faces of the Confederates, shooting double, triple canister, mowing down entire ranks of men. This is the view you have looking down Columbia Pike. Directly in front of me is where Granbury was making his way up. This picture was taken a few years after the war, looking south down Columbia Pike in almost the exact same place I'm standing today. So when I say it was open fields and everything that is playing out there was visible to the troops along this main line, that is almost the exact view that the troops had looking south on the day of the battle. Wide open. Can you imagine all of that taking place? And they could see it all. This is the battlefield. And this is what we've been trying to take back piece by piece around here. And battlefield reclamation is not cheap. So this is my plug to help support the American Battlefield Trust, Franklin's Charge, the Battlefield Trust, with your donations, so we can continue to save battlefield here in Franklin. But back to the action. The Confederate Army has made it almost all the way to the trenches here. And it is mass confusion. As the firing opens and the action really takes off in this sector, it's just chaos. One, yes, Granbury's men did come right up to the road and strike straight into the gut, headlong into the federal defenses. But an odd situation had played out just before that affected Granbury's ability to move. See, as the Confederate battle lines were almost 2 miles long when they first stepped off and started at Winstead Hill, as they converged on the federal works here, they had to bunch up and close up. This created a huge problem right here in this sector of the battlefield, because Cleburne's division, with Granbury being a part of that division, ran into the main federal line right here, and they had to get past them. They had to fight them, they had to overrun them. Well, the next brigade to their right didn't run into the federal line. They were basically able to skirt around them, while Cleburne's division handled the fighting and the routing of Conrad's brigade. So if you put 2 and 2 together, you can see that if they don't stop their forward movement, they're gonna get out ahead of Cleburne's division, which is exactly what happened. So what that means for Cockrell's men is that while the federal troops are getting routed and retreating this way, and Cleburne's division is chasing and running behind them, they've already made it to the main line right here. And that creates an extremely, extremely dangerous situation. And Cockrell's Missourians hit this main line of defense completely unsupported and take horrific casualties. So Granbury leads his brigade right into the federal works, but also right into the leftover mess of what was left of Cockrell's brigade here in this field. Granbury's brigade is closest to the road, and directly to his right is General Govan's brigade. Now Leonard Mangum, who was Patrick Cleburne's aide, rode to the front, rode towards the pike, and he said when he got into this area that he could see Granbury and Govan together. So that means that Govan was probably to the left of his brigade somewhere in this area, and we would think that Granbury would be very, very close to the road right here. Leonard Mangum described what he saw. He said he was about 10 feet from Granbury when he was killed, and after leading this long and horrible charge, his men were tired. And that Granbury's last words were, "Forward, men, forward. Never let it be said that Texans lag in the fight." And shortly thereafter, he would be killed. Mangum said that a bullet went through his cheek and out the back of his head, and the general collapsed to his knees. Almost reflexively, Granbury grabbed at his face, and his body immediately went rigid. This caused Granbury to be frozen in time on his knees with his hands in his face, while all the action continued to swirl around him. The spot where Granbury died is right here. Right in the vicinity of that sign right there is where he was killed. Right here in front of the federal line. He made it this close. He was so close. But even after he died, his men continued the attack. They pushed with everything they had straight into this position. And by the time they got here, they're fully intermixed with the right of Gordon's brigade across the road and Govan's brigade to their right. And as these Confederate troops slammed into the federal line right here, everything broke. When we talk about the breakthrough here at the Carter House, this is what we're talking about. All the federal troops in this area, almost all the way to the visitor center, through here, along the line on this side of the street to the corner of where that building stands, all of this was the breakthrough. Somehow, they left Winstead Hill 2 miles away, overran 3,000 men on an advanced line, went headlong into these works, and broke through. It's an incredible, incredible feat. This battle is taking place at the end of 1864. People love to look back and say the war was a foregone conclusion at this point. Hood's Tennessee campaign was doomed. The Confederates were going to lose no matter what, but you couldn't have convinced any of these soldiers along this line. They fought like they still knew that they could win. And the action that occurred here and the pure desperation that they fought with shows that this was not over. The men of Granbury's Texas Brigade continued to push through the federal works here, and they tried to exploit the breach that they had made to carry this day and win the fight. But because of a series of well-coordinated and desperate federal counterattacks, the Confederates eventually had to give up the ground. They fought incredibly hard, tooth and nail, hand to hand in this area to help repulse the Confederate attack and plug this breach. And at the end of the day, what was left of Granbury's Texas Brigade would lie in this field bleeding. It was over. On a preservation note, this is a really exciting video to make in this series because all the other videos we made up to this point, the spots leading up to where the generals were killed weren't preserved. $5 million for that building right there. Pretty soon, just like we have the lead up into Granbury's death right here, we're gonna have the lead up into General Straw's death right there, right next to the road. Because this building right here is coming down. We've already bought and torn down a building between these two, and then that white building right there is gonna come down as well. So before you know it, you're gonna see this park expand almost to equal size across the street. And it's going to be incredible because this is the final stretch of ground that leads you right up into the Carter Yard. And everyone who watches us, supports us on YouTube by clicking on the videos and subscribing, giving donations, coming and doing tours. We're able to do that because of you. And so this is my sincerest thanks to you for that. Behind me is a Hood County courthouse where you'll find the statue of Granbury. Now, even though Granbury never made it out to this part of Texas, the city was named after him. Now, how his body got brought here is pretty interesting. There was a letter published in a Tennessee newspaper asking the question of whether or not generals should be relocated to their home states after their burial. Once that letter reached the desk of Mayor Doyle here in Granbury, he decided at that point it was time to bring Granbury here to the city named after him. So he reached out to Granbury's sister, got approval, and before you know it, he was on a train heading to Tennessee to go get Granbury's body. They prepared for it for weeks and invited everybody, and they said the crowds here in Granbury had never been larger. There's a news article published that gives the whole scene of Granbury's reburial here in town. And then from here, they did the final procession to Granbury Cemetery, which is a little over a mile north of town. And in true Texas fashion, everyone here has been so friendly. It's actually been a little bit difficult for me to film at times because everybody is so curious about what I'm doing. They want to talk about Granbury. They want to talk about the history. I've learned so much about this town just from talking to the locals. They tell me all the little places here that I need to see, and all the cool little fun facts that I wish I could fit them all into this video. But if you're ever in the area, Granbury is a place where I feel like you really have to stop. One of the attractions of Granbury I was totally blown away by was the jail museum. So this is the Poly jail system that was patented in the late 1800s. It was patented in 1874. It's a freestanding jail cell, and it would have prisoners in these little cells right here. And this is where the name Slammer came from. Because once you shut this gate right here, this giant lever, when you slammed it down into place, it would actuate all the locks on these doors, and it creates this huge booming sound. And so this is how the term Slammer got coined. And on November 30th, 1893, the 29th anniversary of his death, Hiram Granbury would reach his final resting place as he was buried here at Granbury Cemetery in Granbury, Texas. Unfortunately, his first headstone had his name misspelled as Granberry. That headstone was of course replaced later, and the original headstone is in the county museum. I just wanted to read this quote from Private Albert W. McKinney, who was a soldier in Granbury's brigade who survived here. He wrote, "I can never forget the blood-red sun going down through smoke at our backs while we moved forward to the Federal fire, nor how, later in the evening, the ground was so slippery with blood that men could scarcely retain their footing. And the air was so heavy with the smell of blood and gunpowder that it was almost sickening, even to a soldier." I'm happy that I got to bring to you the story of Brigadier General Hiram Granbury, one of the most interesting generals in the Army of Tennessee. And when this video gets published, it will be the 4th of 6 videos that we have published about the 6 generals who died here at the Battle of Franklin. And it has taken me a very long time to get through it. I appreciate your patience, but it is my honor to be able to share these stories with you, and I hope that the wait can be worth it. And then before you know it, we'll have General Carter's video up, and then finally, Patrick Claiborne. It means a lot to me to be able to share these stories with you and talk about why this war is important, why this battlefield is important. Because in this video, we're honoring Hiram Granbury, but I hope also that it's honoring all the soldiers of the Confederate Army that fought here and the Federal Army that fought here.